Welcome to the AI Ophthalmology Marketing Podcast. I'm Peter J. Polack MD. I'm an ophthalmologist, practice partner, and someone who spent most of my professional life watching how patients find doctors, choose practices, and ultimately make healthcare decisions. Over the years, I've seen marketing in ophthalmology change dramatically. When my father practiced ophthalmology, growth was driven largely by reputation, referrals, and being a trusted part of the community. Later, practices adapted to websites, search engines, online reviews, and social media. Today, we're entering yet another shift, and this one may be the most significant yet. What many practices are discovering is that despite having more marketing tools, more software, and more vendors, plus a panoply of AI tools, growth often feels less predictable. Practices are working harder, but many aren't seeing the same level of certainty in the results. That's why we're having this conversation. Joining me is Becky Smith, my business associate, who spent years studying how practices create growth, where opportunity gets lost, and what separates organizations that consistently grow from those that struggle to gain traction. In this series, we're going to explore what we call the new marketing reality, a framework for moving from reactive growth to engineered growth, one service line at a time. Whether you're a physician owner, administrator, or marketing director, our goal is to help you understand what's changing, why it's changing, and how independent practices can continue to thrive in an increasingly competitive environment. So let's get started. So when I think back to my father's solo practice and then compare it to when I first started in my own private practice around the beginning of the internet age, and now comparing it to today's world, it feels like a completely different time, and patients are discovering practices differently, competitors are behaving differently, expectations are different. So from your perspective, what has changed that made this framework that we're about to discuss necessary?
I think the first change that everybody's been doing already is the digital marketing side. In the age of Mad Men, it was advertising, end of story. And so the change to digital marketing is what I'm really thinking of now when I think of the new marketing reality, with the addition of so many different channels that your message to be going out through to the prospective patients, and also the advent of AI in marketing.
That's great that you brought that up, because I think most medical practices have this idea of the effect of AI on marketing, and it's actually completely different than what we think. And you were mentioning channels, and yes, there are more channels, there's more software, there are more vendors, there's more content, again, especially with AI. But it seems like we're just kind of spinning our wheels, and we're not really seeing predictable growth, even with all those tools and channels at our disposal. So that's a bit of a paradox.
Well, it is if you think of everything you're doing as individual centers of excellence. But if you have a system of systems, then everything can compound across all of the efforts that you're making. And that's the big difference. If you're trying to build a brand versus trying to engineer systems that bring in revenue from procedures and new patients, the goal of both of those statements is a completely different goal.
So what you're saying is just being busier doesn't necessarily lead to more progress.
Well, I mean, everybody's out there, you've heard it, I'm sure, shiny object syndrome. And even in the last year, there was all this work about content strategies. Then AI came, and a lot of people assumed that AI would be able to produce the content that would produce the patient. But the nuance of doing it well enough to skirt some of the risks of doing it and also see advantage by doing it, that's a fluid environment. And so the new marketing reality is that if you think across a series of very core processes that you are running and optimizing, that's different than thinking of a new campaign about free sunglasses with a LASIK eval.
So the campaigns and the shiny objects, these are tactical things. And I think when you and I first started talking about this framework, what really resonated with me was it wasn't just another collection of tactics, it was a system.
Right. And the system itself has a focus called service line domination, different from sell everything we do to everyone we can. And if the marketing focus, the marketing strategies take as their core value of we will dominate service lines that we select and put resources to that end, that is a lot different than make sure we talk about LASIK 3 times and cataracts 4 times, and let's get that ad in for the golf retreat. Okay, that all works. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but the effort that requires to keep the plate spinning is becoming very, very challenging.
So as we're looking at this visual here, the thing that jumped out to me wasn't the individual boxes, the steps, which we'll get into with some detail, but it's this idea of moving from hunted to hunter. So tell me about the idea of that concept.
Well, it occurred to me that your competitors are not coming for your brand, and they're coming for your service lines. They'll pick off the weakest one, and they'll divert the patients that you should be getting into their practice. So they are hunting you one service line at a time, maybe multiple, of course. And the difference is that if you have a system that's powerful, you hunt them instead. So instead of them coming after your service lines, you're going after theirs.
And I don't think that most physicians wake up thinking that they are being hunted. I think that it's one of those things that you will start to see something sort of picked off at the margins and then maybe realize too late what's happening. So historically, a lot of practices grew because they were in a growing market, or they had a good reputation, or they had some type of a referral pipeline. So what makes engineered growth different than this just kind of reactive type of growth?
Well, because you're picking the processes that move the needle and you're watching it move or not. If you're just benefiting from more old people living near to you, that's nothing that you had anything to do with. But if you're putting out signals that AI recognizes and puts you in a reply when people ask about cataracts, or if you're getting calls in and somebody knows the disposition of every call, that is something you control. You can't control the general population, although we know 65,000 people a day 10,000 people a day turn 65. But is that true for your area? So these are the things where you benefit, yes, but did you engineer it? No, not so much.
So I think because we're physicians, we sort of internalize some of these things, not just on the clinical side, but the business side. So we think, well, let's scale everything. Let's put more billboards. Let's run more ads, more campaigns. But eventually, this hits a point where you just can't scale it anymore. So is that what this framework is trying to solve?
It's trying to put in place an end-to-end process where you can move the buying journey, the decision support in a way that drives the kind of patient you want to treat in the scale that you can afford to scale. If you're just putting out ads and then watching, that's a lagging indicator. It's like a checkbook. Okay. You can't grow revenue by looking at your checkbook because it only tells you what you spent. You need a way to grow the front end of things. And that's what really this is about. You can control a great deal of it. And especially with AI, you can amplify some of that you were never able to do.
So going back to this idea of the service line domination, I think this is really the heart of this discussion. So the competitor doesn't have to beat your entire organization. They just have to be the preferred choice for a particular service line. So let's use premium cataracts as our example, because that's kind of for most ophthalmology practices, that's going to be their core business. Let's dig a little bit more into how the service line behaves like categories.
Well, there's a lot of work in marketing. You can research it, but there's a concept called category domination. And for a service line like cataracts, that's a category. LASIK is a category. Dry eye is a category. And so rather than just having the brand halo effect of people liking and trusting the practice, now you begin to have a special relationship when it comes to one procedure or one service line or one category. You can even brand it, lifestyle lenses for your optical group or whatever. But the patient now doesn't just think of you as an overall provider of a range of things. You are now rising in prominence. In Texas, we call that cutting one out of the herd. So you're cutting one out of the competitor's herd. And you're saying, I'm going to take these cataract interested folks and make sure that I'm top of mind because of all these things that my system is doing as they inquire.
So explain a little bit now, sort of at a higher level overview of this framework, and how does it apply to the practice as opposed to an individual service line?
I like that. And before we leave, though, I want to close this, what we've been talking about, with a wrap up idea, which is you don't have a marketing problem, you have an engineering problem.
Yeah.
That's the basis of the new marketing reality. And how do you fix that problem? Well, you engineer service domination. That's the outcome that you seek. The way you do it are the objectives that we're going to talk about in this panel. And so each of these panels is, you could look at it in one way, like you would look at a panel in a lab test or a panel for blood work. So everything you're doing is responding to signals and data and even just word of mouth and general opinion. But the order that you do these interventions, if you will, is what builds a system that is engineered versus a system that is spontaneously organically being thought of and deployed without the context that this has.
So you and I were talking previously about the bookends and then the meat of the framework. So how does that map to the practice versus the service line?
Well, speaking to bookend, if you look at the two pieces, the first one is about the signals that AI is getting about your practice and the entity domination that you seek at a practice level. Then the end piece is the domination in the market that you seek across these 7 results when you look at the practice as a whole. But that's at a macro level. The micro level is the signals that you're sending for a specific service line and the 7 results that you're measuring against that service line performance. And one of the R's isn't revenue. If you do the 7 things and your sales process is strong, then the revenue takes care of itself.
So if I can improve my reputation, my authority, or my AI visibility, as in the panel 1, that's going to help me across every service line. But if I'm optimizing for premium cataract conversion specifically, that's going to drive that one service line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The way I think about it is you do the first 2 for the practice in the very beginning, if you want to adopt this model. And then once you do the service line, you send the signal again, and you go through and you do the other panels, including the measurement.
So now again, staying high level for a little bit, most physicians, practice owners, they want to pounce on the growth part first. So why is growth not the best place to start?
Well, from my opinion, and that's what the model reflects, is you're already getting leads, but you're not optimizing them. You're not even capturing as many as you could be. And then they're declared dead, but are they? So the first thing after you decide the service line that you want to be dominant for is you have to triage what you already got coming in before you try to amplify more of those leads coming in.
And then the other recurring theme I see also is the opportunity thread. We've had discussions about this before, is that who gets credit for the revenue at the end of the line? Is it marketing's responsibility? And your answer was, well, they can only be responsible for the opportunities. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, the revenue is the last mile, if you will. And I think the biggest switch in this model as well is that this model is focused on the opportunity, not on the scheduled surgery. So if you take care of the opportunity, it flows through to the end that you seek. But marketing, well, there's a very famous quote by Eli Goldratt: marketing spreads the corn, sales shoots the ducks. There is a literal handoff from a marketing qualified lead to a sales qualified lead. And attribution by marketing can only go so far when you think in terms of what most people assume when they know ROI. Well, what is the ROI of an opportunity? If you can't attribute the source of the lead, and for example, let's say we're seeing this more and more in some search behavior. You type in a question, who's the best cataract surgeon in Tampa, Florida? And ChatGPT pulls up a couple of practices and then lists a few doctor names. And you read it, and one of them is Visionary Vision Care. And then you read about Dr. Sanders. So you close that, and a day later, you go to your browser and you type in visionaryvisioncare.com. The actual search is for that URL. So who gets attribution there? Does the search engine get it when they click to see your practice? But the AI informed you.
The website guy.
Exactly. Or the marketing guy that's doing the
Mhm.
data collection. So because of the way people arrive into your sphere of influence, there's only a certain amount that marketing could be accountable for, because even if they bring the lead in the door and the person opts in on the website or calls, if sales doesn't do their job, attribution for marketing, what marketing started, never happened.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, let's dive a little deeper into each of these now. So we'll start with brand signal. And so, as I was kind of mentioning at the beginning, when a physician thinks about AI and marketing, they immediately think Chat GPT. How can we use Chat GPT for marketing? But that's not really what we're talking about here.
That's right. What we're talking about is, what are the signals that your marketing department is putting out that AI could find that helps it determine the three things? Does AI find your practice? Does AI know your practice? And does AI trust your practice? So part of it is when you're searching and they want a cataract surgeon near me, we did an experiment. We asked Siri that question, and she answered with 3 practices, but no doctors. So the signal that you're doing must be dialed in for location in respect to the service line that you're talking about. But also, does AI know what you do? Does it have any idea of the types of procedures that are doing it, and something that the patient would like to know about the journey maybe, or the experience? And then, does AI trust you? Are you the authority that it assesses as recommendable? So it's not just putting out content with keyword stuffing blog posts anymore.
And the other thing that we've discussed also is that the way that people are using the AI systems, the way that they're asking is different. So I've had colleagues talk a lot about SEO, SEO. They're referring to traditional SEO or doctor SEO, as they call it, hiring people to write content that follows these keyword terms. But that's not really how people interact with AI.
No, it's not. I mean, an average search is maybe 3 words, 4 words. An average AI search is 7 words and up. The patient is presenting a problem in AI. So it is not that SEO doesn't matter. It does. AI gets signal from your SEO scores, so to speak. But the answers that people are wanting, see, its focus, the algorithm is focused on the correct answer. It's like it's a gaming idea. It's gamed to give the correct answer. So what it deems is the best correct answer is the one that gets presented. So now you can't just think about ranks, because you could rank and still be invisible in an AI reply.
Yeah, that's a tough one to swallow there.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that's what I mean. New marketing reality. The way that you play the game with AI is a lot different than the way you play the game with a search engine.
Yep. All right. Well, let's move on to part two, which is choosing your battlefield, choosing the service line. And I think one of the hardest things for physician owners is deciding what not to focus on, because we have this overall big picture. We're not really in the weeds necessarily, but we just want to make everything better. So why is this service line selection such an important strategic decision?
Well, you can dominate something that you are focused on and consistent about. But in order to have that happen, there are some things that have to exist. And in the model that we have, the concept of service line is you map the process of selling it, basically, booking the surgery, in other words, or the procedure.
And that's your entire process you're talking about, right? From first call or first click or website visit or whatever, through the entire process.
Correct. Because at certain touch points along their patient journey, then marketing can apply different kinds of pressure. Then once you've mapped it, the process becomes you have to build it out with marketing technology, but you also have to change then a process. It's the process, the people, and the technology. So you've done the process part. Now you have to implement and execute the process. So the people and the technology become the factors. Then once it's running, there's always the get it running side, and then there's the keep it running side. You've got to have certain data coming to you. That's what track it is. And then optimizing it is decisions about the data that you're presented with. So that's what a systems approach could be doing for a service line marketing strategy.
And we talked about previously using premium cataract as an example, cataract surgery, that it's sort of like selling airplane seats. So talk a little bit about that
Oh,
analogy.
well, think about an airplane. Every day, there's a certain amount of seats for the LA to New York flights. And if no one sits in those seats, there's no revenue and it's gone for the day. Well, the same is true for surgery center availability. For unscheduled surgery, you have excess capacity. And so where that matters is you'll never get it back. The day's over.
The next is the marketing triage. So as a physician, the word triage makes a lot of sense to me. Before we can treat something, we need to identify what's happening. And so if we're going to extrapolate that to marketing, before we grow, we need to assess our threats, which in our marketing, if we're going to use the traditional image of a funnel, we have to identify the leaks.
That's right. And leaks come from they manifest as several ways to track what leakage there is. For the opportunity triage, this is where they come in and the disposition of the opportunity is unknown, or worse, it's lost. So the reason that opportunities get lost are multiple. Do you capture them? Well, does the operator capture every contact that appears to be a viable opportunity? Do you convert the inquiries that you've captured? Or do they drop out there because nobody follows up? Do you get back to them in time before they've shopped another practice? And then, of course, can you recover them if they have dropped out? Then triage shifts in the sales cycle to a different set of activities, a different set of processes. So the sales process itself needs to be examined. And I know that doctors never think of themselves as people who sell things. And
Well, I don't want to think of this process as selling. Yes,
that's
true.
right. And yet when you do a cataract recommendation,
You're selling.
You're selling. Now, the patient may have concerns. They may not be financially able to do it, but that should have been determined a little bit before the doctor made a recommendation. However, is the patient educated enough to accept the recommendation enthusiastically? I don't know. I know I had a friend that had cataract surgery, and I sent her just a grid of the lens options and the aspects of choosing the lens. The doctor made the recommendation, but she kind of wanted to see something that the practice she went to wasn't sending their patients. So the selling side of it happens only if you salvage the opportunity. Now, the last piece of triage is the traffic itself. The traffic is the source of every opportunity. And so, for example, let's say you do an ad for golfers for cataracts, and the ad, when they click it, goes to your homepage. So that's
bad.
Bad. That's an interrupt.
Big fail.
Yeah.
But everybody does that.
A lot of people do. Yeah. I mean, you need a bridge page that says, "Welcome golfers. We're glad you're checking out Visionary Vision Care." And so these are the traffic triage points that you should look at as well. Because if you scale, you're just sending more traffic to leaky buckets.
And also, one thing I've learned early on is that if you start jacking up the volume, then you're also going to magnify your inefficiencies in the system. So that's another problem that we deal with. Yeah. All right. So let's move on then to number 4. Now, let's talk a little bit about where the name came from, because if this is going to sound very self-serving, so maybe you can explain how you came up with the name for this.
Yes, you and I have had hundreds of hours of me asking dumb questions about how does it work when this happens? How does it work for the people, the techs or the surgical coordinators? And what evolved, what emerged was basically a wish list of things that you thought could be beneficial if they were happening, but how would we put them in the context that everybody, the colleagues, could understand? And so I just started calling these emergent ideas the Polack Protocol. And then I finally put it together in the first sort of organized and systematic view so that processes to do these tasks could either be automated, but somehow stood up, manual or automatic, so that there is, after you do marketing triage, there's 2 other things that have to happen. The next one is sales growth, and the third one is local domination.
And when you and I started working together, we were sort of dabbling. This is kind of where we were starting, and we were working to try to improve our LASIK lead system. And so we were applying some marketing principles from Dan Kennedy, and we were looking at sales pipelines and some automation tools at the time. And it was relatively rudimentary at the time, but it had a big impact. So we kind of started in the middle and then sort of filled in the edges as you went.
Well, sales growth, the 3 things here: sell more services more often to more people is by a very brilliant marketer named Jay Abraham.
Oh, yeah.
And his bottom line was you only sell with these three things.
Preeminence. Mm-hmm.
Yep. In fact, preeminence, it was his big aha moment for me as well. So looking at it through ophthalmology, you can add things to your service lines, new lenses. You can add new procedures, sell more often. If it's something that is repeatable, then like Botox, are you automatically pulling them back in after 6 weeks? Do you have touches designed to awaken them and encourage them to look good in their Easter photographs? So sell more often things that are repeatable. Even just
Glasses, yeah.
well, even just exams. How long do people wait now? If because of the economy, they may be waiting 5 years instead of 2.
And what actually some practices will have an issue with that depending on their practice management system and
Mhm.
say, we don't have the ability to schedule someone out more than 12 months. Well, that's a problem.
Well, even if you don't schedule them, you still be talking to them.
They need a system to follow up. Exactly.
Yeah, and you live in Florida, so there's snowbirds. Do you want them to go home for the summer and get all that work done? Thank you.
It's
No.
true. Yep.
So local domination is the other piece of selling because healthcare is local. So you need ACE, authority, credibility, and expertise. And you also need referrals, which is the peak of success, word of mouth. And that is predicated on reputation.
All right. Our next stage is revenue science. And I think one of the things that I realized over time is that, and you would know this as a marketer, but as a physician, a surgeon, I had to learn is that a lot of patients don't make decisions just based on information. And we talked about this earlier, is that if you just overload them with information, that's not necessarily going to help them make a decision.
Yeah, we used to have a stair step that said data is not information, information is not knowledge, knowledge is not wisdom. And the patient needs to see you as wise. And so giving them more information, data points, bullet slides about your lasers or your whatever the details are for your tech is not going to go as far as you might think. So the patient is on an acceptability journey. Do they, in the end, believe that you're the one to mess with their vision? And you know this. You know because you talk to them every day and you hear the same concerns. What could your marketing have done so that that patient never voices those concerns as wholeheartedly, at least, if not at all? What could marketing help get done in the mind of the decision makers? That's not always just the patient. Older folks have caregivers or family that helps them with medical decisions as well that you're not doing now. That's what we're talking about.
And I think the issue with physicians is that we're always thinking in terms of a scientific approach to things. And so we think by giving them all that information, I've got a colleague with a very reputable practice, and their LASIK information page for patients is pretty much just copied and pasted from the laser manufacturer. So it's just data about the laser and FDA and things like that. So even someone in the field, it's kind of overwhelming for me. Kind of reminds me of, we're talking about, you're referring to friction in the process.
Yeah, because a lot of that workload, a lot of that friction can be handled by a whole nother job role, not by computer either, but the developing of the rapport, the developing of the relationship can happen before someone meets the salesperson, because you can have someone raise their hand, but they've been essentially called what we call a marketing qualified lead. So they've read the marketing information, they've received it and decided that it's time to talk to someone. But now they need to transition from a marketing qualified lead to a sales qualified lead. And putting one person, a VA, doesn't have to be in the building, in charge of walking through all the inquiries, handling all of the back and forth, so that when it's time to move them to talking to the salesperson, which I believe, Peter, is the refractive coordinator or surgical counsel.
counselor. Yeah, it'll
Mhm.
vary from practice to practice, but
Yeah.
yes, exactly.
So that person that arrives there, the person that they're talking to is not trying to reach them for the first time. That's been handled. They're not trying to reply to emails. That's been handled. And all they're doing now is reinforcing the experience that the patient expects, managing expectations, creating desire, assuaging fears, because they're doing the technical answers, not the person on the front end. But engineering the sales process this way means that the maximum amount of sales opportunities are handled every day by the one person who closes the sale.
And then the last stage is measuring domination on 7R scorecard. So actually 7Rs started out as the major concept in our ultimate ophthalmic marketing guide. This was pre-AI search. And so it's now evolved in our new marketing reality.
Correct. It started out being, what strategies are you pursuing? And we had strategies for each of the R's that you could begin building systems around or marketing programs around, so that as you raised each of the results, you began to see upside at the end where revenue was recognized.
Which, by the way, if you're listening, are reputation, reviews, retention, reactivation, resell, recruitment, and referral. If you ask most doctors about marketing, they'll equate that with advertising and they'll equate that with new patients, which is recruitment. So that's just one of the 7Rs that we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, you've had conversations, everybody around the table says, get more new patients. And
Which you want, but
yeah, but every vendor comes in the door saying, I can get you more new patients.
more leads, more leads, more leads.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So the factor, the R's themselves, how do you measure them? Well, for an overall view, we use a maturity scale. And so you're either not doing it at all, or you're just doing it through heroics because something has to be done and you do it. And whew, that plate is still spinning. Or you've managed to mature the process so that it's optimized and you're world class. So it's not just get more reviews, but it's like for AI, if all the reviews say great surgeon, AI is not going to listen to that. That's noise, not signal. If the patient writes, Dr. Polack did cataract surgery on my eyes, and had a special case where I'd already had LASIK younger. And so it was tricky, but I was really surprised that my recovery time wasn't as long as I had feared. And my vision now is just like I was in my 20s. That review is what AI will recognize as valuable, not great surgeon. 5 stars, yeah, that's 5 stars.
And so the nice thing about this is that we moved past the lead generation that everyone talks about. This is really looking at the health of your entire marketing system.
Well, each of these R's is responsible for opportunities. Reputation gives you opportunities. Reviews give you opportunities. Retention gives you opportunities because you're selling more or more often. Reactivation. How many dormant patients that haven't come in for a comprehensive that you have in your database that really they're just sitting there until they wake up and say, gosh, I think I need an exam.
Yep.
Resell. Okay. Are you reselling Botox every 6 weeks? We went through that. Recruitment, and we know that one, and referral. And this could be co-management or it could be referrals through word of mouth. All of those R's give you opportunities in some way.
My biggest takeaway from this is that this is not simply a marketing framework, but a growth engineering framework. The old model was really about generating activity and hoping or assuming that growth followed. But this framework really starts with the assumption that growth can actually be engineered and measured and improved deliberately. And so this is really what independent practices are going to have to do if they want to compete in the years ahead.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, even if you just do one or two of these on the way to domination, okay, you don't have to boil the ocean and start everything at once. I mean, start with one side and work your way through to the other. If you start with the two bookends for your practice, that sets up your entity dominance. That sets up the fact that people are now coming to you through types of outreach and opportunities in the 7 Rs.
And I can give you a quick anecdote on that, on the AI brand signal, because we've started working on this. And our administrator was at an Asker's workshop, and they were asked to pull out their phones. They had no idea what they were going to be asked to do. Pull out your phones and search for who's the best cataract doctor, or what's the best cataract practice in my town, and put the name of your town in there. And hers, out of dozens of people, was the only search that pulled up the name of our practice, her practice in that case. So these things can make a difference. So it seemed a little overwhelming at first, but as you said, start somewhere and start building out the system.
Yeah. I mean, today's was just context for the system. We want to set the expectation that you will get actionable ways to do each of these 6 steps or these 6 systems. But unless you understand what you're building with the end in mind, you have a bunch of Legos, but are you building a Death Star or are you building a pirate ship? And I think a lot of marketing looks like a bunch of Legos. So you're reaching in the bag and you're saying, oh, LASIK campaign on Facebook. Oh, new lenses for springtime. So yeah, that's a bunch of Legos.
Yeah.
But until you build a Death Star, you got nothing but a bunch of Legos.
Well, that's a good analogy to end on. So thank you.
It's been great.
As we wrap up this episode, I think the biggest takeaway is that we're living through a fundamental shift in how practices compete and grow. The old reality was largely about generating activity and hoping growth followed. The new reality is about engineering growth deliberately, one service line at a time. In future episodes, we'll unpack each of these pillars in much greater detail, beginning with AI brand signal, because before patients choose your practice, they have to be able to find you, understand you, and trust you. If these ideas resonate with you, we'd invite you to visit Visionary Marketing Lab. Right now, you'll find a growing collection of resources, tools, and conversations designed specifically for independent ophthalmology practices. And over the coming weeks and months, we'll be rolling out the new marketing reality framework in much greater depth, starting with AI brand signal and continuing through each of the systems we've introduced today. Our goal isn't simply to help practices do more marketing, it's to help independent practices build better systems, compete more effectively, and continue to thrive in an increasingly complex world. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.